as I said, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Christina Barrett. She is a wonderful former CMN mentor with us. So she's been through the whole process of being a mentor and supporting young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. She's been a freelancer for 10 plus years in the industry, and she's worked across fashion, music, and she's done it in various different settings as also agency, brand, publication, artist. She's an absolute wealth of knowledge. And if I just show you some of the clients that she's worked with over the years, you're going to be shocked. As soon as I saw these names, I was like, these are some big brands. So she's worked with Dazed, YSL, ID, ASOS, Jimmy Choo, Miu Miu, On Cloud Running, Converse, Adidas, and many, many more. And to name some of the big campaigns that she's worked on with Sydney Sweeney, Bella Hadid, Arlo Parks, across Days, ID, and Brooks Magazine, and various other things like that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Christina to start the main portion of the evening. And she'll run you through kind of the format, what we're going to cover. And don't worry, we're going to have a massive Q&A section at the end. So if you've got any questions, please just drop them into the chat bar, and then we'll get to them all at the end. So thank you very much. And I'll hand over to Christina.
Thank you so much, Amelia. It's really great to be here and meet all of you guys. You know, freelancing is something that I think can feel a bit sort of daunting and scary without all of the kind of administration and finance side of things. But actually, once you're equipped with the tools and the knowledge, it can be super, super rewarding. So I'm so excited to be hosting this online event with you guys. And so, yeah, we're going to be covering the key bits in what's important to set up as a freelancer and to kind of maintain that freelance life. We'll start off by talking about what's needed to set up, and then kind of the differences between going solo, setting up with an agency, money, rates and contracts, invoicing, getting paid on time, you know, your tax and national insurance liabilities, and then expenses. And then, as Amelia said, we'll move on to the Q&A. So let's get it started. All right. Okay, nice. So the first thing, one of the biggest things when setting up as a freelancer is having your portfolio. That's where, you know, your clients, you know, prospective collaborators get a feel for you, and it's where they get to see your work. And, you know, there are various ways in which you can have a portfolio. You know, having a website, a social media account, you know, are both great. Websites kind of allow you to sort of customize it a little bit and build a bit of your brand, you know, so whether that's through color schemes, typography, etc., you can also add some of your own personality to it, which is great. But then, you know, social media accounts such as Instagram is really good because you then have that social interaction element of it as well. And, you know, with prospective employers, you know, agents, there's that kind of interaction element on stories and things that can get a natural kind of organic conversation going. And one of the tips that kind of really helped me when it comes to the portfolio side of things is having a few different versions. So, you know, if there's some of you where you're a writer / graphic designer, you know, there might be a freelance gig that you want to do that's specifically graphic design or specifically writing. And so having, you know, a compressed PDF or, you know, a Google presentation slide that you can send to those specific clients that really call out that sort of work and skill set is really, really useful. So yeah, those are the key things about portfolio. And also, one more thing, if you can, try and always show kind of where your work has been used. So one of the kind of biggest mistakes I'd made when I was leaving ASOS actually is I had all of these incredible images and videos of shoots that I'd produced, of shoots that I'd cast, but I had forgotten to kind of take pictures and proof of where they lived. So I didn't go to that bus stop and photograph the campaign at the bus stop or screenshotted that article or something, you know, where it was in situ of the context in which it's being used. So that kind of stuff can always show, you know, clients, collaborators, oh, okay, it was for that article, I remember that article, et cetera, and it can kind of, you know, strengthen sort of the chances on working with them. So that's portfolio. And then the next thing is deciding on whether you'd like to be sole trader or limited company. So both are kind of self-employed status. And I started off as a sole trader because I wasn't kind of too sure on how long I was going to be freelancing for. And one thing that I really like about that is that there's generally kind of a lot less paperwork, a lot less admin, and it's good if you're kind of wanting to sort of dip your toes and try it out kind of thing. But, you know, the one downside to being a sole trader is that you're personally liable. So say, for example, you've designed a logo for a brand and months later they come for you and want their money back for some whatever kind of crazy reason, they will come for you personally and, you know, be like, hey, we want our money back for XYZ reasons or whatever. So yeah, you're personally liable for anything to do with your business. Whereas with a limited company, you're a separate entity from the business. So if that was to happen, they would come after the limited company and not yourself. And also limited companies can be seen to sort of be, you know, kind of a bit more professional, kind of like, you know, a fully rounded, you know, thing. And I did eventually transition into being a limited company, but then what comes with that is more upkeep, more paperwork, more administration, company accounts, etc. There are also two other forms as well of your kind of self-employed status, which are called partnership, a sole partnership, and a limited liability partnership. And those are really useful for those of you who want to, you know, kind of set up a business and there's two of you or more, maybe collective, duo. They're less common, but they're definitely kind of worth looking into if you want to go into business with someone else. And at the end of this doc, you'll find a load of helpful links, one of which is kind of a comparison and a guide of all four to sort of help you kind of work out, you know, what's great for you. But one thing to mention actually is for those of you that maybe have another fairly reliable source of income. So let's say you've got a side hustle, you're part-time somewhere, or you even, you know, got a 9-to-5. In this freelancing thing, you know, you want to go down freelancing in addition to that. Setting up a limited company is a lot more beneficial from a tax liability perspective. So it's something to kind of be mindful of as well, if any of you have kind of another stream of reliable income. Yeah, so that's kind of the status side of stuff. And then moving on to bank account. So this is where your fees will be paid into. And I strongly suggest to always set up a separate bank account to, you know, the one that you've already got, be it current, be it business. Setting up a current account is usually fairly simple, straightforward, very low cost, if not free. Setting up a business account can come with a really, you know, small monthly fee, or a period where it's free for say 6 months, and after that you pay a couple of quid each month. And there are kind of, you know, pros and cons to both. You know, with like the current account, it's usually really easy and you can probably do it under the same bank that you're in. But then with business accounts, they can have like integrated software, accounting software that can support you with your bookkeeping. You know, they might have things like overdraft facilities. And so it's always really good to do a little bit of research before committing if you're, you know, really kind of on it with wanting to go freelance. For me personally, kind of being a producer and having to pay for suppliers, crew who are in, you know, different countries sometimes, I needed a bank account that didn't give me hefty charges on international transaction fees. So that was one of the things that I looked for in, you know, kind of like the pros and cons of different accounts. So it's good to do your research to find something that suits you. And yeah, kind of money saving expert, you know, Uswitch are all really good sources to kind of, you know, find those comparisons. And then after, you know, you've set up a bank account, it's really important to register your new status with HMRC. So, you know, when you're freelance, your pay and tax isn't calculated automatically every month. You submit your tax on the 31st of January. Well, you know what, let me not say on the 31st, like ideally way before. Don't leave it until the deadline, which is what I did in my earlier years, and it caused me a lot of stress. So, but yeah, you submit the tax that you owe when you're self-employed. So it's really important that you register that with HMRC as soon as you know you're doing freelancing. Otherwise, sometimes they can issue penalties. And it's a fairly simple process. They make it kind of really easy, and there's a link again at the end of this document which gives you a step-by-step guide on YouTube of how to register, and it just asks you questions such as, you know, when are you starting freelancing, what's the nature of your business? So it could be producer, graphic designer, art director, you name it. So yeah, those are the kind of key 4 things to consider when setting up to be a freelancer. Okay, And then next, so do you go it alone or do you join a talent agency? So these both have, kind of like amazing benefits. I personally kind of have been predominantly solo. I did sign up with an agency at one point. It was really interesting to kind of see the different clients and work that they were sending my way. Going solo is nice because you have that personal rapport and relationship with your client, and you can kind of pitch for the work yourself and show them your ideas, what you're about, what you want to create with them. And you can kind of be, building kind of your own reputation and energy within the organization. You also get to keep all of your fee, which is great. And then with a talent agency, they will take a bit of the fee that you would have ordinarily got to kept if you were solo, but then at the same time, they have access to loads of clients, right? And they can help find you the work. So sometimes that hustle of kind of always keeping on it and where can I be working and what can I be doing, a talent agent is really useful for that element. And also as well, kind of having another sort of contact and middleman to support in certain communications. So if it comes to payment or getting paid late, or if a client is maybe a little bit slow with telling you the confirmed start date or whatever it might be, a talent agent can sort of take that administration and communication away, which is sometimes nice as creatives. It's nice to kind of have that noise kind of reduced, so that you can sort of focus on what it is that you want to be creating and doing. So I'd say, those are kind of the main things with going it alone or joining a talent agency. Okay, great. And then, so next we have rates and contracts. So setting your rates is super important, and they vary on many things. The key ones being your experience level, technical knowledge required for the job, length of the contract. So for example, if you're doing a day here, a day there, a day here for a brand, and you're charging £500 a day, let's say, if that brand were to turn around and be like, okay, I'm going to book you for 9 months, 5 days a week, then it's quite common for people to reduce their day rate a bit, because that 9 months of, of full pay 5 days a week versus a day here and there warrants a slight reduction. The client know what they're getting from you, you know what you're getting paid. So the length of contract is quite important when considering what to charge. Similarly, again, kind of the nature of the client and use of your work is great. So is another thing to consider even. So when I say nature of the client, let's say you're working for a small business who, I don't even know what to like, vegan trainer brand or something, fresh out of the UK, really great supply chain, no crazy money from investors, right? Versus a worldwide known brand who's been around for 50 years, who, do you know what I mean, have kind of loads of sort of money and cash flow. Then depending on the nature of the client, that might, adjust kind of what you're charging, so kind of accommodate the nature of them, and also the use as well. So use is, I think, really, really important. And it's something that, like producers, that we consider in a lot of decision making in our work. So, if you design a logo that's, say, going to go on a trainer that's worn by hundreds of thousands of people, that is a pretty big use. And if you're maybe going to design a logo that's going to be used, in the press or something for like an internal away day or something like that, both amazing things, but the use is quite different. And so that's kind of something that's good to consider when you're looking at your rates. And then, of course, unsociable hours. So if anyone's trying to ask for you to work late nights, weekends, definitely consider that when kind of getting your rates together, as well as extra considerations such as travel. And then when it comes to sort of knowing when to increase your rates, reviewing every year is great. And I think when reviewing every year, looking back at, okay, what have I done for the client? And, what's the market saying? I've gained all of these skills. And basically putting a case forward to, your clients, the people that hire you, Researching as well as to what other freelancers are charging is a really, really great thing. You know, there are a lot of kind of salary surveys and comparison sites which can help guide your decisions. Some of those are like Glassdoor, that are also really good as well for reviews of companies, if you kind of just want to get a feel for the place, as well as kind of how much they pay their staff. Major players do quite good salary surveys for both freelancers and full-time people. And then there's Juno, which is a really great kind of organization for freelancers, and you can sort of see there people charging amounts per hour, per day, and that can kind of really help on the research factor, as well as for any people who are kind of crew here on this event. You know, union rate cards have really great guidance on what to charge. So, you know, if anyone's in film, television, advertising, you know, costume design, etc., you have BEC2, the APA, Equity, the Writers Guild of Great Britain, for any writers amongst you, to kind of get a feel for, you know, rates and how much you should be charging there. And then kind of giving clients, you know, as much notice as possible is always a win for them to kind of get their ducks in a row and, you know, get it all approved. And then contracts. So contracts is really important, and it's kind of something I think as a producer, it's just a standard across anything. You always have agreements and contracts and releases in place. But I think had I maybe not been a producer, I may have been like, oh, I can just take this email, like I'm starting work on this day, it's fine. So if you can, try and always have some form of agreement in place, even if it's kind of just a one-pager with just a few key bits of information. And that can be a contract / template that you provide the client or that they can give to you. And it should always include, you know, payment, how much you're being paid, and the payment schedule. So for example, it might say, you submit as an invoice and we pay it within 30 days of receiving it. Or it might be like, we pay you weekly, make sure you send us an invoice on a Thursday in order to get paid. You know, whatever that payment schedule structure is should be outlined in the contract. And then, you know, your scope of work is a really important one. So if it's kind of, you know, design a logo for the new sneaker launching in whichever month, assist the art directors with designing, you know, whatever it is, it's great if it can be kind of detailed somewhere in the contract, just so that everyone's on the same page and kind of knows what's up. And then location of working as well. So, you know, if it's remote, if it's hybrid, be in the office these many days a week, address, etc. And then hours. So yeah, whether it's 40 hours, 30 hours a week, or if you're working on a day rate, that rate covers an 8-hour day, a 9-hour day, etc. Yeah, that's about everything for rates and contracts. And then moving on to invoices and getting paid on time. So yes, invoice is really important. Without that, you ain't getting your money. And yeah, like it's something that actually I kind of realized that the invoice number and the invoice date are so important. I think sometimes it's easy to kind of like just fling it over and maybe forget to kind of number it correctly, or just put any random number on it. But it is really important if you can kind of like number your invoices chronologically and have the date on there, because internally for like companies, that helps them basically get it paid quicker from their own internal reconciling and financy type of stuff. But yeah, so it's really important that you get an invoice over, and it should have invoice number, date, breakdown of the work, total cost, and then payment method, i.e. bank transfer by X amount of days. And we've got kind of an example link on this doc as well, if any of you kind of want to get set up with your invoicing. And then, yeah, so how can I get paid on time? So again, making sure that the terms are crystal clear. So ideally, that's all outlined in your contract. And when kind of everything's locked and you're ready to start, it doesn't harm asking a few questions such as, you know, where do I send my invoices to? Is it invoices@company.com, etc. Just so that you have the contact and you've got all of the information, you know, up front, so that you can just bang it out as soon as it's ready to go. Yeah, an invoice immediately or systemically, follow up on specific days. So one thing that's really great about, so there's some kind of bank accounts such as Starling and things that have accounting software integration. And QuickBooks, for example, is a pretty popular one. And they have this thing where it just automatically reminds the client if you've not been paid yet. So, you know, because it can get a little bit long, like having to constantly chase people. And that's just kind of an automated system. So for any of you who are kind of interested in having that kind of aspect made a bit easier, some of this kind of integration accounting software can help and sort of do the following up for you. But with that said, you know, some clients do like to pay late. So it is worth, you know, sometimes kind of considering and reminding them of the commercial late payments business rate, which is currently set by the Bank of England at 8%. But this is kind of one to be mindful and consider, but also I've seen examples where it's kind of like made the client a bit annoyed and hasn't always helped the freelancer. Now, I am not making excuses for people and businesses paying late because it is not okay. But what I have seen is sometimes life just happens. So, for example, a lot of businesses use purchase orders, and purchase orders is like a unique code generated by a business that goes into your invoice so that when they're doing all of their cost reports, they can kind of just report really accurately on all of the funds. And it gets raised by somebody, right? Created by somebody, and then there might be like 2 approvers or 1 approver. And that approver might be on holiday, and the person who's covering for them might be sick or something. And then the company does a payment run once a month. And so by the time everyone's back and well, the payment run's been missed, and it's just turned into this thing that's been blocked. And it's like no one intentionally wanted to pay anyone late, but life just happens, and it, you know, and it kind of made a bit of a mad situation. So I think in those instances, it's always good to kind of, you know, just inquire and ask questions. So, hey, is there a reason why I'm paid late? You know, is somebody off unwell or what? You know, and I think asking those kind of questions can encourage your client, the person who's managing your payment or who has hired you, to kind of almost find the answers and deal with it. Do you know what I mean? Like a good friend of mine, actually, Rebecca Chuck, she's a freelance copywriter, actually, who's been doing her thing for years, and she's incredibly amazing. And actually, her copywriting guide is linked at the end of this document, and it's basically a fantastic guide for freelancers to kind of market themselves through copy on websites and captions and everything. And it's great. But she kind of once told me, you know, sometimes if you ask questions, it almost forces people to really realize the answers. And I think with something as awkward as like late payment fees, it's just like, oh no, wait, okay, yeah, like that person's awful, let me go and figure it out. And so that can kind of be a really nice approach. And then obviously if they're doing a madness and they're ignoring you and it's bad vibes, then yeah, that's kind of when, you know, when to go in with the reminder of the commercial late payment fee. Yeah, and then next one. Cool. Okay, tax and national insurance. So yeah, so we touched on it when we looked at the HMRC, kind of registering with HMRC on one of the first slides. So yeah, so we are kind of, as self-employed people, are now liable to submit our tax to HMRC every year. And the personal allowance, I think at the moment, is about 12.5k. Anything within that is tax-free. And then anything over that up until £50,000 is taxed at 20%, and then over £50,000 is taxed at the higher rate of 40%. And when you are kind of submitting your self-assessment, the kind of main 2 things to be mindful of is basically turnover, which is money in, and allowable expenses, which is money out. And so the difference between those 2 things will determine what your tax liability is. And then you will get taxed on that amount, and also your national insurance and other calculations will be calculated from that amount, which is considered your net profit. And yeah, so, you know, the deadline is the 31st of January after the tax year. So say, for example, the tax year ending the 4th of April 2023, I will be liable to submit my self-assessment return by the 31st of January 2024. But, you know, like I said earlier, don't leave it until then because it's long. Do it when it's fresh in your head and, you know, and you're much closer to having done the work. But kind of one of the things that, you know, HMRC have developed to prevent people from being like, oh, I've got this massive tax bill way after I even had this money, is they've generated this thing called payments on account, which basically is an estimation of how much tax they think you're going to pay. So you end up paying tax twice in a year instead of just in one lump kind of thing. And that's good because it just kind of helps manage the money so that you don't all of a sudden have to find all this tax money out of nowhere. And then also, you know, if they've estimated that you owe more tax and actually you owe less, then you get a tax rebate, which is kind of like a nice surprise. But generally speaking, when it comes to tax, if any of you are thinking like, you know, okay, finding it a bit intimidating or anything, then something that works for a lot of people is just to have another account in like 20%, for example, of what it is that you're making. They just put in another account, and then they know that they're always going to have more than enough money for the tax man. So that's another thing to consider, you know, on the tax front. And then let me just see if there's anything else I had to mention on tax. No, all good. And then, yeah, national insurance. And then again, so national insurance is also calculated on your tax return, as well as kind of like, if any of you went to university, your student loan and repayments. And yeah, national insurance is kind of paying money into the state, and it works, you know, it's good for things like the state pension, but I mean, by the time we're going to be eligible, we'll probably be like 75. So I know there's a lot of people, like, I know a few people who are more keen on looking at other ways and kind of creating their own form of what that state pension will look like, right? So, you know, but I think that, yeah, like your national insurance is definitely taken into consideration with your tax return. And if you are earning less than the threshold, you can choose to voluntarily pay. But yeah, that's kind of everything on national insurance. And then last but not least, we run into expenses. So what can you expense as a freelancer? So you can expense so much as a creative, you know, like I sometimes find, you know, like I need to keep my finger on the pulse with, you know, with talent and people to hire. And I've just recently started working in the art space. So, you know, having a membership, for example, at the ICA, the Institute of Contemporary Arts, helps inform my job and my ability to like work and be good at my job. So that's something that I can expense, you know, that membership, you know, magazines, research tools. If you hit the shops, get yourself a new outfit that, you know, you're going to be using at networking events or in interviews, meet and greets, whatever, you can charge that as an expense, you know, your travel to and from, you know, where you're working, if you've got stuff, so a laptop, or for any people who are, you know, filmmaking, if you have a camera or anything, you know, the insurance for that can be expensed. You know, your website. So yeah, there is kind of so much that can be expensed as a freelancer, and there's like a full kind of comprehensive list on the gov.uk website. And then when it comes to kind of tracking expenses, one way that has really worked for me is, and this kind of goes back to the bank account thing in having a separate bank account, is just pulling statements. So, you know, we all get our statements, be it monthly, maybe, or paperless. I know, you know, a lot of this is all happening digitally online now, but you can log into your online banking, you know, you can kind of, you know, when you can search transactions for a couple of weeks, months, whatever you want to do, make the date range custom. So for example, 5th of April 2021 to the 4th of April 2022, which is that entire tax year. And then just download the statement, the transactions from that time period. I download them into an Excel format, or like CSV it's called. And then that kind of is a spreadsheet. I use the sum function in Excel, which basically totals all of those numbers. And then boom, I've got all of my expenses. And because I've kept all of those business expenses in that bank account, I know it's all business. There might be the odds where I've been a bit happy tapping away, and I'm like, oh, that wasn't business, to remove that, Christina. But that's kind of a really good way that kind of helped me sort of track and collate all of those expenses. And then when it comes to doing your like HMRC self-assessment, you can kind of have a gauge of what your tax liability is going to be, because you're like, okay, well, I've had this coming in, I've had this coming out. This is what I'm left with. This is what I'm going to be taxed on. And a lot of kind of the new app-based banks as well, such as Starling, they allow you to, once you've tapped, you've done a payment, you can then take a picture of the receipt, and that receipt will live in that transaction on the bank account, and there's kind of similar sort of activities. So yeah, that's kind of a really great way to do it. And I wouldn't advise against kind of having loads of different accounts and paying for things in loads of different ways, like, yeah, because it just gets a bit complicated, and then you're like, but wait, what was that for, and you've got all these different sources, and it just can give you a bit of a headache that's like not always necessary. So yeah. And on that front, actually, if there are any of you in the audience that maybe have a bit more of a non-straightforward setup, so if you're maybe have like a stream of income, but then you're doing freelancing in addition to, or if you're maybe doing kind of freelance creative work, another kind of work, I don't know, say you're also creative in construction, for example, and then the expenses thing is a bit different. If there's anything like that, I actually have an accountant now that's kind of been helping me as of recently. I spoke to him earlier, and he is willing to do like a few free 15-minute consultations for those of you that need that support. It's Black owned, his name's Yemi, they're awesome. So I guess I kind of leave you guys to maybe follow up with Amelia, if any of that is useful to you, and you can kind of chat with me and we can sort of figure something out. But yeah, I think that's the main gist of everything. So on to the Q&A.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, there's no rest for the wicked on Christina. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the Q&As that have been dropped into the chat bar first, and then hopefully that will leave us with some time that everyone can just ask any questions that they've got. I appreciate that was a lot of information. So as we answered in the chat earlier, we'll drop everything onto the YouTube channel, and then we're also going to try and do is create a big PDF resource guide. Again, so it has all the information in one document, and as Christine said, if you've got interest in being set up with Yemi and have any questions about accountancy and how it can work your business, then please do let us know and we can introduce you. So I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top. Okay, so first question is, should you use the same bank account that you would be receiving income for business expenses?
Yeah. So use the same ones. Anything that's business related, whether it's money coming in, money going out, yeah, it should be the same business bank account, or current account, whatever you decide.
And then this is a good question. So do you have to sign up for self-assessment right away, or is there an amount you have to make first? So I know you mentioned that there's 12,000-ish tax-free, but do you still have to sign up anyway? So
I think at the moment it's £1,000. So if you earn anything over £1,000, you should sign up. You won't have to pay any tax for anything that's underneath 12,500. But HMRC do ask for you to register with them if it's anything over 1,000. With that said, they give you until October after the end of the financial year. So if we say, April the 4th was the end of the financial year this year, 2023, you would have until October to let them know. So you don't have to do it like day of or straight away. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it's the October at the end of the at the end of the tax year, that you started freelancing in, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then this is a good question. So this is about if you're a freelancer in different kind of industries. So if you're a freelancer in hospitality and then design, do you need to register those separately? But does that come down to if you're going it alone, or you want to become like a registered?
Yeah, so it depends on how those different industries engage you. Mm-hmm. So say if one of them kind of have you on a fixed term contract and then you're through PAYE, you could just have the second one as self-employed hospitality. So let's say did they say they were hospitality and design, was it?
Yeah.
So yeah, so say if the design company has your fixed term PAYE, then you could just keep the hospitality separate. But if both were both freelance, say working on a day rate, it's a tricky one. I think that you are fine to keep it under one, to keep it under your sole trader, and then what you have to do is kind of use different SIC codes. So they're basically used to kind of classify what you do. I think that would be the best protocol, but it might be good speaking to Yemi on that one. But I'm pretty sure, because with my stuff, it's like, you know, production, casting, art buying, etc., video, stills. So I had a few SIC codes in that, and that was fine. So I'm 99% sure that's the best thing to do, but that might be a good follow-up one to kind of clarify.
Yeah, Yelena, I'll reach out to you after this call, and then we can hopefully arrange something and find out a bit more information for you. Okay. Oh, good question. Where do you find talent agencies?
That's really good, actually. I mean, because I'm a bit older now, I feel like for me it was just the internet, you know, when I was starting, like Googling and very much searching and asking people. You know, WeRP's major players are some good ones. I feel like Martin Media does quite a few bits in fashion. What are some of the talent agents? I can have a think and like give you some more.
I can see if we can find like a resource of like some depending on industries as well. I'll make an episode and find those. And then a really good question, I suppose, will come into your expertise and how you've done it before. Do you think it's better to do a day rate or an hourly rate?
I've worked on a day rate, and the reason for that is more specific to production. So it might be that, cool, this is what I think the day is going to look like. And then the client at 10 a.m. do an absolute curveball, and they're like, no, we've got to put a pause on this. This artist hasn't signed this off, blah, blah, blah. If I was working on an hourly rate, I'd be screwed. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, well, y'all are paying me for the day. So, you know, and obviously, I'll find other things to do. I won't just be sat with my feet up, not doing any work. But, you know, I found the day rate useful as producers, but I think then maybe, I don't know, maybe kind of like in design or that kind of stuff, hourly can be helpful. But I think day rate's pretty solid, and hourly is better for people who tend to be asked to work longer. So for example, crew, you know, on film shoots, your crew, such as your gaffers, so they're like lighting team, your grips, people that are fixing the cameras. You're filming with, you know, an actor or an actress, and it's just like, if they rock up late, hey, they rock up late. The crew are the ones that are going to be finishing late to accommodate that kind of stuff. So 9 times out of 10, they do a lot of overtime. So they work on, you know, an hourly rate. So I think that, switch it up dependent on the likelihood that you would be doing overtime or not.
That's good.
That would be my advice anyway.
Okay, next question. So how do you navigate working in an industry where the rates are already set?
Where the rates are already set.
So I don't know if that would be from Jay Williams. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about like the industry that is, or do you mean like there's kind of like a standard that everyone's expected to work at?
Because sorry, I work in like audio, so it's like, it seems like no one really sets the rates. I can't describe it. Like, you'd approach someone and they'll say, this is the rate.
Right, okay. The APA have some kind of, is it within advertising or what's
No, it's like podcasting and radio.
Podcasting, radio, okay, so that's kind of a bit newer. I think Bec2 would be really good to kind of hit up and get a bit of guidance on, you know, kind of audio rates. Typically
Bec2?
Bec2, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so they're kind of in Prospect, and they do a lot of they're like a kind of like a union, and they do a lot of kind of like crew rates, and you know, there should be some kind of audio engineering information there that they can help you with.
Right.
Thank you.
I will. Okay, and then the next one is about someone who is going to be paid below minimum wage, which obviously we do not advocate for at all. So it's a question more about when a client gives you a contract, can you kind of go back with your own? If it's something that you disagree with, can you ask for addendums? Or I suppose how that conversation go?
So it can be a few ways. So if the client are pretty firm on like, you have to use our contract, then what I've done in the past is, if I've had a few terms and conditions and things that I want them to agree to, I just get them to embed it within their template. So yeah, so if it's like, okay, if they're pushing for a rate and I'm not happy with it, then obviously that's like a negotiation thing. But the terms of the contract, I would just ask them to, you know, I'll send over the information in email and say, please, could you send me a new draft, including this information? And then often that kind of works.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer that question?
Does that answer? I think it's from Sandy. Is that satisfied?
So not really, sorry. Basically,
Right.
so the client came back and I realized that they were going to pay me £7.14 for a £50 a day for 2 days rate, and then for 8 hours as well. So I calculated it was really low. So I was thinking, yeah. Yeah, how do you go about it? How do you kind of like decline the offer kind of thing, or just something?
Yeah, because it's basically not offering London minimum wage. Is that what you mean?
Yes, basically, yeah.
Yeah, so I would kind of just go back and, you know, like express, you know, and obviously this is the case, like really want to work with you guys for XYZ reasons, really want to, you know, start on the project and kind of, you know, express to them, you know, your keen interest and just say, you know, I'm living in London, and I'd really appreciate it if you could pay London minimum wage. Is there anything that we can do here? And just kind of have that conversation, because I think it's more than the London living wage is a thing for a reason. So you're well within your rights to ask for that. And it can be tricky. Like I've kind of been there when you're like, oh, I don't want to like lose the work or piss them off or whatever. But, you know, asking for like the London living wage is not, you know, unreasonable in my eyes. So yeah, and you could even say like, you know, kind of sort of take I think sometimes it's really good in these conversations is to kind of remove any kind of personal energy. So, you know, I've been doing some research lately, or, you know, I watched an event on Creative Mentor Network and they gave me some really good advice. Is there any way that you could, you know, kind of match some of the things I've learned? And kind of almost like that as well can be a good way to, do you know what I mean? Have them be like, oh, okay, wow, let's see what we can do here.
Sandy, I think it's me and you that have been emailing, so I'm happy to help you kind of like write an email to them and we can figure out like
Yes.
as you said, a way to keep it quite clinical, very clean, no emotion in it, and just see if, you know, that they can increase what they're going to pay you as they should.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Really good question that I think kind of gets missed a lot with freelancers is how do you incorporate holiday time within the contract or communicate that with your clients?
This is a good one. So with being a freelancer who's working on a day rate, and you're submitting your tax liability to HMRC, it doesn't typically always include holiday. So when you're off on holiday, you're off on holiday and the business doesn't pay you, and that can be quite an attractive thing for employers because they don't have to worry about all the benefits. It's usually when, if you want to kind of go on, say, a fixed term contract where you're maybe through PAYE, that holiday will be considered. You know, for some kind of crew, some employers do allow holiday considerations, but that's typically if you're on a weekly rate and then your fee is a little bit less. So it varies per industry. Kind of I've like worked in sort of like youth culture, fashion, and I've been on a project by project basis. So I could be working with somebody for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. So because of that almost sporadic, not consistent energy, it's really hard to apply some kind of holiday framework to that. But if you are maybe working on a documentary and they're booking you for 9 months and it's you do these days every week and there's a lot of consistency there, then that can be sort of talked about and embedded into your kind of like rates and contract. And again, kind of sources such as Beck2 and Prospect are really great at, you know, helping work out what those holiday allowances should be.
Thank you. And I've got a question about late payment. So is a late payment basically anything that is past the terms that you've set out in your contract? So as you said, it's normally 30 days, but it can be shorter,
yeah, it can
longer.
be shorter, longer. Yeah, so exactly. So late payment is exactly that. Anything that's after not only what you've stipulated to the client, but what's agreed in the contract. So say, for example, they say, cool, we're paying you 30 days after receipt. And then on your invoice, you've said must pay within 14 days. As long as they've paid you within their 30 days, it wouldn't be considered late.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's just always good to make sure that your requirement of when you want to be paid aligns with what's agreed in the contract, so it's the same. And then it would be late if it's after that 30 days. So if I submitted an invoice today, it's the 30th of September and they didn't pay me by the 30th of October, on the 14th, 15th, I'd be able to be like, hey guys, where's my money?
Fair enough. And then I think this is a really good question. So if it were to happen, how would you decide on the amount for cancellation fees, for example, if they cancelled midway through a project?
That's a very good question. I've used the APA terms and conditions on cancellation. So off the top of my head, what is it? Let me see if I can find an agreement. Actually, no, it'll probably take too much time to find it.
A link out after.
But yeah, it's kind of like, roughly speaking, off the top of my head, it's you know, if a client cancels the job, I think it's like a good couple of weeks before, it's like 0% of my fee that they have to pay. If they cancel, you know, 2 weeks before, it's, I don't know, like 5% or something, and then basically 7 days and less, it's then like it's getting more expensive for you basically. But I can't remember specifically. I think maybe like 7 days or less is maybe 50%, and then a few days before it goes up to like basically 70% kind of thing. So but the APA have really good kind of guidance there on that even people without, you know, not in the advertising industry have used as a kind of go-to.
We can include that in the follow-up console, make sure that you get that, Jay. And then another good question is, if you are a sole trader, can you register your car as a business vehicle? Like, do you still get that level of expenses, things like that?
Yeah, so anything vehicle related, if you're using it for business purposes, can be an allowable expense as a sole trader or a limited company.
Okay. But
one thing is that depending on what you do will decipher whether you are a limited company or a sole trader. So at the end of this document, in one of the guides, I think on the second page of helpful resources, you'll see there's like a tick and a no. So, you know, like hairdresser, fine to be a sole trader, but then there are some things where you do have to be a limited company. So it depends what you do. But yeah, like generally speaking, a car can be, you know, a business asset if you're a sole trader.
Okay. And then Rose has raised a really good point.
But just quickly to go back on that, sorry. One thing with that, because basically I had a computer which I'd bought before I started freelancing. So I couldn't like have, let's say the computer's £1,000 or whatever. That's how much I bought it for. And then let's say when I started freelancing, the value of it was £300 because it was old. Then, do you know what I mean? Like that's something that has to be considered. So if you already own your car, let's say you bought it 2 years ago, and you'll start freelancing today, you can't expense the whole value of the car. It would be an amount based on the value and then how much you use it for the business. So if you use it 50% of the time for personal use, 50% of the time for business use, that all needs to be calculated. But that is something that I reckon Yemi might be able to kind of give you a little bit more detail on.
And then what happens if you don't register as a sole trader or a limited company? I think we spoke about this yesterday when you said that during COVID it meant that you were able to get a bit more access to support, things like that.
Yeah. If you don't register, I mean, I don't know of anyone who's like
ever has tax man.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's that deep. You might not want to show this, but like they say, you know, register within 5 months of the end of the tax year. But I also like if there's just a little kind of job here and there, it's not really, you know, imperative. Yeah. So I guess, and the thing is, I think generally speaking, you know, HMRC, they come in for people that are mad tax evasions, that are, you know, have got 20 properties and don't pay a single amount of tax. Like that's, you know, like people who are just trying to make a living, like, you know, although it has been known for them to do tax investigations on small businesses too. And they do say that they do issue penalties if you don't register your status with them. But I don't personally know of anybody who has received a penalty for that reason.
That was good. That's diplomatic.
Yeah.
This is a good question. I think is actually very relevant to you. Is how do you handle money coming in from abroad if you're working with international clients? Or if you're having to pay them?
How do I handle it? What does
so
just comes into the account?
Is that more to do with like the currency changes, or is it like, I don't know if you'll need it.
Yeah, so with, I know what you mean. So basically some banks will charge you a fee that will take away the whole amount. Say you're being paid £200 and then the bank might charge 20 quid or whatever. So this goes back to the point of when you are setting up a bank account, there are some you know, app banks that kind of integrate with currency. Oh, what's the name of it? There's like a currency app that is integrated with Sterling that you can use, which means you don't get charges on the international transaction, but then it does mean that you have to pay for Sterling like a couple of quid every month. So there are ways to kind of make it, you know, as low cost as possible. So yeah, I mean, when I've been abroad and I've been, you know, and I can't be spending on my UK card because they're just going to charge me crazy amounts, I will then opt to use like a separate Monzo account or something that's just not going to charge me crazy fees. Like before that, I used to use like the postcard. Like there used to be like this card that you could use internationally. I think it still exists, like before Monzo was a thing. So yeah, I think just kind of looking into ways in which you can spend that are quite generally good for traveling internationally.
Okay, we've only got a few more minutes. I'm just going to try and go through the questions I think will apply to most people. Do you think it's useful to have a business card before you start getting an income? So like currently buying things, like you said, to do freelancing, but haven't yet had any payments in?
Yeah, I think so. Then just make sure you've got an overdraft on the account. So, you know, if you're currently buying things but don't yet have any income coming in, you know, you'll need an overdraft to facilitate those payments. So yeah, for sure, you know, you can always, if you're like, okay, cool, I need to buy this equipment for me to do the job, you know, I need to buy this membership for me to go to that course or whatever, or pay for that course. Most definitely. Just, yeah, kind of, I think having an overdraft facility is good for that.
Okay, perfect. And then I think some of the last final questions in the text box are stuff about like where to find things, and just general advice about wording. So what I'll do is I'll make sure I include all the resources that Christina has mentioned today, and then you'll be able to find advice as to like how to word things in contracts, how to kind of you know, delegate and be nice to clients while still getting what it is that you need, which is your payment, and all things like that. So we've only got a minute left. So if there's any burning questions for Christina, feel free to take yourself off mute. But if not, thank you all so much for coming today. And you've been really, really engaged and dropped some great questions into the chat. So thank you massively to Christina.
Thank you.
And quickly before you all drop off, what I will say is we do have some programs upcoming with CMN. So if you haven't already been a mentee and you would love to be a mentee, please do take a look at our website as we've got places for Break the Wall coming up in 2024.
Nice. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
This has been really fun. And yeah, honestly, like it doesn't have to be a daunting or scary thing. You know, once you've got that information, you can go out and smash it. And yeah, it's been great.
Good.
Thanks. Have a good evening. Oh, that's nice to see all the comments.